An important concept in the espresso method is shapes. You won't often hear me talking about things like eyes and noses and mouths because they're shapes. I'm not going to teach you how to draw an eye. I'm not going to teach you how to draw a mouth because the idea of drawing an individual object like that is very restrictive, because it means that you're going to feel that, hey, I can draw an eye because I've been taught how to draw an eye. I can do some lips because I've been taught how to draw lips. I can draw a horse because I was taught how to draw a horse, or a dog, or a house. These are all left brain concepts, and there's a very good book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which explains the idea of your left and right brain. But essentially, your left brain is the logical part of your mind, and it thinks in terms of symbols like an eye, a nose, a mouth. And thinking like that leads you to draw in a cartoon fashion, really. So you need to be thinking about shapes. Can I draw this shape? Can I draw that shape? And really, it's all about looking at the shape, whatever shape it may be, and just reproducing it. And you may not think that's an important idea, but it is very important, because it means you can get any image at all, something you've never seen before, and all you have to do is reproduce exactly what you see. So it's all about learning how to see shapes. So, stressing the idea of shapes, there's all these various shapes. There's this shape over here, and that shape is sitting on another shape over here. And there's these other shapes over here. And there's this general shape over here, and so on. And of course you can drill down into smaller and smaller shapes. And the accuracy of your painting will be determined by how accurately you can relate these various shapes. What's the relationship between this shape and this shape? What kind of space is there between those two shapes? What's the relationship between those two shapes and this shape here? So once you start to see your image in terms of a whole bunch of shapes, it doesn't really matter what name you give to that object, whether you name it an ear or lips or a jawline. Forget about language and think about shapes. So when you're looking at an image that you're proposing to paint, then you obviously are intending to reproduce it. So you want to know where these various features are on the image, because you'll be trying to reproduce them on a larger board, but in the same relative position. So, for example, on this image, I can see that the horizontal center of the image is somewhere along this line here. And this image is fairly symmetrical. There's a line there. So you could pre-mark your board with some rough lines, and they'll give you an indication of where you should be putting the various shapes. So if I was to determine that the absolute center of the board was at this point, I know that these shapes are in a certain relation to that point. This shape is at a certain relation. So you start to see all the various relationships of the shapes. And that's how you compose your picture. You should always stand back at the viewing distance when you want to look at how your painting is progressing. And the viewing distance is the kind of distance you have in an art gallery where somebody can't get close because there's some kind of a protective barrier. Because when you're actually painting, all you're seeing is all the tiny little strokes that you're doing that don't really give you an idea of what it's going to be looking like when somebody else is viewing it. You may think, this is looking absolutely terrible. I need to smooth things down. Try and avoid that, because you're not seeing the full picture. And the full picture is when you stand back and all those paint strokes become just part of a pattern of textures and colours that make up the full feeling and expression of the painting. So as I come forward to this forehead, you can see where I've tried to capture the light coming from his left, and over here there's some blue being reflected off the blue background. So there's a different, paler, bluer source of light from the right, and there's a much brighter, whiter source of light over here. Notice this interface, this blue interface, which you often get when you have artificial light hitting skin. Capturing all these little bits are going to make your painting look that much better. And very often when you have two light sources, there's a light source coming from the left, there's some light hitting from in front. The darkest point is between those two light sources, and the very darkest point is next to the strongest light source. So you may see, hopefully, that this stretch here is the darkest, and when you stand back, hopefully you can see that a bit more clearly.